What's up guys, welcome back to another video here on Muddy Beards 4x4. Today we're going to start installing the automatic transmission into my 1997 Jeep Wrangler TJ, so stick around. Okay guys, to get you all caught up, if you haven't watched the last video, part 1, I have all the part numbers that you're going to need to do this swap. This is a 32RH out of a 94 YJ. I rebuild it, do a Transgo full manual shift kit in it, and rebuild it with all kinds of parts. And I go over all the parts that you need in order to do this swap. So today, we're actually going to put it into practice, pull the manual transmission out, start doing all the little things that you need to do to install this transmission into this 97 Jeep Wrangler. So the first step is pulling that old manual transmission, so let's get to it. So something real important that you might not think about is the pilot bushing, and then this is also a bushing in the crank itself. The nose of the torque converter will go fit right into this slot right here. So if you do not remove both of these pieces, you will basically suck your transmission up and you will break your pump inside your transmission because it will not fully seat the torque converter inside the crankshaft. So one of the tricks that I've done a couple times is basically just fill it up with bread. You could also use grease. I found this to be, I mean, it's messy, but it's not like greasy messy. I can just vacuum this up. It's not a big deal. And then I'm going to be using a 13mm socket and a 3/8 extension, and I'll fill up the inside of the socket with bread too, because it'll fill up anyways. There it is, right there. So this is going to be much harder than the pilot bushing. The pilot bushing, you can get a puller at your local parts store, rent it, and pull that out super easy. You don't have to use the little trick that I used. The puller is much easier. This, you would have to get a blind hole puller. I went around to a bunch of auto parts store, could not find one that would rent one or that had one. The only place I could get it was at Harbor Freight or ordered online, and I wanted it right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this spacer in here. Just going to weld this nut inside here and tighten it up, and it should pull that bushing right out of there. Hopefully it works. There it is. I need to show you guys the difference here. This is the flex plate for the manual transmission. It has where the clutch rides built into it, so it is much thicker, much heavier duty than the flywheel for the automatic transmission. So the flywheel to crankshaft bolts are much longer. You can see right here, this one's shorter, because otherwise this one would bottom out in the crank. The other thing I need to go over is the crankshaft position sensor. The plug is different for the TJ and the YJ. So TJ on the bottom, YJ on the top. So I ended up having to buy a new crankshaft position sensor for a 97 automatic 4-liter TJ. With both of the transmissions out on the floor, we're going to go over some of the differences that we can visually see and what that means for us in this swap. So the manual transmission, this is an AX15, is 1.5 inches longer than the 32RH. So what that means is your transfer case will actually be 1.5 inches closer to the front of the vehicle. So your rear driveline may need to be lengthened, or it might be totally fine. That's up to you to decide and figure out. As far as the tail shaft and the output shaft, you can see how this one is sticking out of the case, and this one is inside the case slightly. So that may be an issue for some of you guys. I don't know all of full details of what year and what part numbers and everything, but I do know that this MP231 transfer case, this is a long input shaft. So if you have a short input shaft, I'll put a picture up on the screen, which they're about this long, this will definitely not work with this transmission. So this is where the extended seal comes into place. I can see how we're going to need this. That's going to bring that out where it actually engages on the input shaft of the T case, because otherwise it would not seal at all like this one would, because the seal's right here, and in this one it's way back in there. Next thing I'm going to work on is the engine separator plate. You can see it's missing, or not missing, the new one doesn't have an inspection cover. If you don't have it, dirt and rocks and whatever as you're driving around will fling up into where the torque converter is, and you don't really want that. Here is the inspection cover all cut out, cleaned up, and on there with the engine separator plate. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take my pick from the bottom side holes, the 3 holes on the bottom that I need to drill out, scribe where I need to drill the holes, and then drill 3 holes and paint it up. Should be good to go. So I was able to get the output shaft seal out with my seal puller. It was actually pretty easy. We're going to install the extension housing seal, and I'm going to actually just take it over to the press and press it in. There's the seal all done in the housing. Looks pretty good. Went in super easy. Since I have this out, before I put this back on, I'm going to show you guys my shift linkage and some of the issues I've had and modifications I had to do. You can see right here to the tail housing in order to make the shifter work. So I have everything hooked up on the bench as it will be in the Jeep, and I actually ran into a bunch of issues with this down here in the tail housing and the mounting. It comes with all the brackets for the shifting, everything here. This is all really nice and I really like it a lot, and the shift cable is really nice, and it comes with this pretty sweet bracket that bolts to the pan bolts. This setup does not appear to be made for a 4-wheel drive because this bracket right here runs into this extension housing. You can see right here where I notched it out. I had to cut a little bit out right here in order to clear for this bracket right here. Not only that, but the bigger problem here is the actual transmission mount itself. This is the piece I cut out here, and I ended up just remaking this transmission mount, cutting a bunch out of it, and I had to notch it here because this guy goes right here, and it's in the way of pretty much everything. So I have everything set up, and I'm going to show you how it's going to operate. So we got park and reverse, neutral, 3, 2, 1. I did do some modifications to the shift gate on this, and I'll show you that right now. You can remember before when I was shifting, it would go tunk, 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 tunk. Took like 5 different gates to get down to park. Now I have set up so I can go from first all the way to reverse in half a second. So that was first to reverse. Actually hooked up on the linkage. Everything is actually working, and it stabbed me in the leg. First, reverse. So it's really quick because of the modification that I made here. All I did was I cut out the gate in the neutral position, and then I shaved off the corners between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. So it just is a little bit of a smoother ride into neutral or reverse. So I'm really happy with the way that turned out, and the linkage is shifting very nice. So here in park, I went ahead and took the cable attachment off of the linkage and made sure it was actually in park and there was no side loading or that it was stressed out in either way, kind of halfway in between. Reattached it, and then I did the same thing through every single gear. So reverse, took the cable off, made sure that it was actually in reverse and not loaded up in any direction or halfway in between any gear, and so on and so forth. Just went through every single gear, making sure that it was perfectly center all the way down. It took a little bit of adjustment in the cable, tightening and loosening the cable to make sure that it's perfect in every single gear, but I think it's going to be worth it in the long run. I'm not going to have any problems, and it's going to be shifting perfect right out of the box. Now before I put this torque converter in, this is the new one from Oregon Performance Transmission. This is the one that came with this transmission here, and I do believe this is the factory one. I have looked up a manual. CR68 is the correct torque converter for this. Flat style hub right here. As you can see here, this is a slotted hub. So I believe this to be a CR52L, which is a low stall torque converter, which according to the sheet, it should be 17 to 2100 RPM stall. And they also make this one in a CR52H, which is a 1900 to 2400 stall. So only 200 to 300 RPM difference between the low and the high on this. This factory one is, it doesn't give specs on the stall, but this one is a high stall. So if I have an issue with the low stall of this pushing through the brakes, I do have the backup. This one, just in case it does push through the brakes, I can just throw this bad boy in. I just want to show you what I made here for my jack. I do not have a transmission jack, and I did not want to spend about $200 to get one, so I drilled and tapped my jack on the top here, and then I drilled some holes in a 3/16 plate, and I just bolted it to the top here, and I have a ratchet strap that once it gets up higher, I can just strap around. Oh, you guys, I got this thing mated up to the engine. As you can see, I do not have the bolts all the way tight, just loose, because if you torque it down and your torque converter is not all the way engaged into the transmission, you will break your pump and you will be pulling your transmission out and buying a bunch of new parts, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you get this up in here, and that you're not going to be able to see it, but I can spin the torque converter with this pick. So it is loose, it is not bound up in there. That is very, very, very important. I can't stress that enough. We need to address the transfer case linkage. One, every bushing on this thing is totally shot and garbage, so I have a new kit coming, should be here tomorrow, but this now is 1.5 inches too far back. So this is now here. It needs to be back behind this, but it doesn't reach there, especially with all this sloppy junk here. But this has the linkage drop, which is going to make this super easy. I'm just going to unbolt all of this stuff here, unbolt this from here, measure 1.5 inches forward, drill 2 new holes. I think these are even self-tappers. Yep, they're self-tappers. And just self-tap 2 new holes 1.5 inches farther forward, reinstall it, reinstall all the new bushing kit here, and this will be ready to install. You can install the transfer case and start bolting everything back together. Okay, several hours later, something that should have taken 20 minutes turned into 2 or 3 hours. Extended linkage right here. Both of these bushings broke, so that crown kit is absolutely garbage. Maybe if you heat it up with a heat gun, you might be able to get it to work, but I did not have any luck. So the only one that's new is the green one up in here, and that is about ready to break. So once I get the transfer case in, we will get this adjusted right here and tightened down. So on to the next thing. Okay, so there is my inspection cover installed. Torque converter bolts are torqued in. Everything is good to go under here. We got our temperature sensor right there. All of our shift linkages are here. Everything's all good to go. The thing that I do need to discuss and talk about is the TV cable, which should go right here. This is something that I did, something that you guys probably shouldn't do unless it's a trailered off-road only and or race car, but I just wired my TV cable all the way open. So what that's going to do is it will make my line pressure 100% all of the time. So it's going to slam the gears in between 1, 2, 2, 3. I don't shift very often. I'm 90% in first gear almost all of the time. So that probably is not going to be an issue for me, but we will see. I have the TV cable and I left everything so I can just hook it back up and it will work. So there is a big hole right here, right there, and I need to cover that up because nothing is going to go through here anymore. The shifter is not going through this. Just plasma cut it out, and I have this rubber grommet that I put around it so it should seal it to keep water and stuff coming out besides this little hole here. So we are going to bolt this up. Okay, we got our plate installed here, and my shifter is now totally bolted in and installed. Pretty happy with the location and how it turned out. I did have to make some spacers right here, some angled spacers for the front on this side and a smaller one on the other side in order to make this actually sit because of this gap here. And this is the temperature sensor wiring coming down from below. The other modification I had to do was obviously for the center console. I ended up cutting this little section out right here to make room for the shift console, and then a little bit of a nub down somewhere in here, down there. And I also got my temperature gauge installed. I'm just going to run it right here. It's going to look super clean, almost factory. Just used a 2-inch hole saw. Here is the shift linkage. I got it all connected, all routed. So it's right up here by the passenger front seat. So I had to drill this huge hole, ogged it out really big so the cable could run through it sideways. I wrapped the whole cable in aluminum HVAC wrap. So I ended up moving this hole here down so give me a little bit more clearance underneath here. And like I said, it's wrapped all the way down through here, all the way. And in this area right here where it's closest to the exhaust, I have it wrapped like 4 or 5 times in this one spot. So here's the shifter. It's going down, boom, right there underneath the seat. It is hooked up right now. So there's a little, I can feel it going into the gears now. And perfect. It's not binding up. I was worried about the cable binding up with how much of a turn it is, but it's not binding up at all. So I can still just first to reverse right there, park. I really am liking how this is working out. Front drive lines. So this is going to be an issue for a lot of you guys. The automatic transmission front drive lines are skinnier. So the tube, this one is a Tom Woods. It is a 2-inch tube, and with it bolted up here, it actually touches the shift linkage here. It doesn't push on it, it just barely touches it. So in park, it touches it. A lot of people will have issues with it coming in contact with their pan right here. Mine does not do that, and that is because I have a high pinion Dana 44 that is custom narrowed that I did so the pumpkin is offset to the left a little bit more than a factory TJ front axle. So that's good, but still I have this clearance issue here. I need it shortened 1 inch and 1.5 inch quarter-inch wall DOM tube for the main body of the Driveline instead of 2-inch tube, so I don't have any issues with this right here. Or if I'm flexing out or doing anything crazy, it's not going to hit my oil pan right here. Okay, here we go, guys. This is more than a month worth of work coming down to this moment. I have the key. I have not started it. Nothing. Okay, I gotta figure this out. Okay, guys, it's the next morning. I was hoping to fire it up last night, but as you saw, I couldn't get it started. Did some diagnosis, got super frustrated, went to bed, at it again fresh, looked at a wiring diagram, figured out the problem is the manual transmission jumper. I traced it down to this particular spot on the wiring diagram. Everything else is totally cool. This is the little guy right here. So this connector goes from the reverse light switch in the manual transmission. Reverse light switch, boom, right here, and then this connects to the main harness under the Jeep. And I just didn't think that I was going to need it, so I figured when I sell the Jeep or this transmission, it'd be nice for them to have, you know, this connector. But what I failed to realize is this harness also includes this jumper right here. This little guy right here was the problem the whole time. In order to make this thing run, I'm going to have to plug this connector back in, or I could go in and just actually jump those 2 wires on the harness, and that would work too, but we're just going to plug this back in quicker and easier. Okay, round 2, let's try this again. I forgot to plug the connector back in after I just filmed that. Dang it. What an idiot. Okay, for real this time, hopefully. Making a tiny little bit of a noise. I'm not exactly sure what it is yet, but it's still reading on the dipstick, so I'm going to put it into gear. There's no drive lines attached, nothing, so really nothing can happen, but let's see. It's reverse. It's definitely loaded up. Neutral. Third gear. Second gear. We go down the first, then I'll go see if the output shaft is spinning. I don't know why I'm pushing on the brakes, just have it. Well, guys, it is now 5 weeks later since the day that I started my Jeep up in this video right here. And so I gotta tell you, there's a lot of things that happened since then. If you haven't watched some of my last couple videos, you might know a little bit about this, but the transmission, I was super pumped. It ran, put it in a drive, went in the drive and it worked, had reverse. I went for a drive around the block. It was like 10 o'clock at night, so I didn't film it because it was dark and I was tired and I just didn't want to do it. And it seemed to drive fine. I was super pumped. And then it didn't shift at all. Put it in second gear, still in first gear. Put it in third gear, still in first gear. So I had all first gears and reverse. So I started diagnosing the transmission. I put a fluid pressure gauge onto it. My line pressure is 150 PSI with that TV cable adjusted all the way up, which is great. So I know my pump is working, putting out all the fluid pressure that I need in order to run the transmission. My 1-2 servo has 0 pressure in second gear or third gear or any gear, doesn't matter. And so it should have 150 PSI as well in that servo. That leads me to believe that I probably have a valve body issue. And unfortunately, this transmission was an unknown. I had no idea if it worked or not. I kind of took a chance on that, rebuilt it, put the stuff that I saw was wrong with it, fixed all that, and then put it together, put it in there, and it just didn't work out for me. So everything that I've done up to this point, all the stuff in order to install it, all of that worked absolutely fantastic. Everything that I did, the shifter, the covers, everything that I did worked awesome, except for the transmission. So all the stuff still stands, all the process, everything, just you have to have a transmission that actually works in order to drive it, I guess. So who would have thought? Nate and I decided we were going to go to King of the Hammers, and that was like in a week and a half from when I had installed the transmission. I had thought that I was going to be all ready to go, and it wasn't. I went ahead, just took the automatic out, put the manual back in, put it back the way it was, and I'll just figure out the automatic later. That's what I decided. Well, if you guys don't know, I never made it to King of the Hammers. My flex plate on my diesel truck exploded in Portland, about 2.5, 3 hours away from my house. Never made it to King of the Hammers. I have Moab coming up in April. Family, vacation, wheeling trip with all my friends and their family. So as for right now, this automatic in this Jeep is on the back burner. I am still, as I have time, going to slowly kind of diagnose it and figure out what the problem is. I might have to get a new valve body, but we'll see. I'm air checking everything, all my clutches, going through everything one more time just to make sure, I didn't screw anything up. Maybe it was me. I just don't know. And I don't have time to look at it right now. So probably after this Moab trip, everything will be settled back down, and I'm not going to be stressed out about these big long trips and having something go wrong in a very untested automatic transmission. I know this works, and I'm just going to use it the way it is. So I hate to leave this video out on a partial fail. And I wouldn't say it's a total fail, it's a partial fail for sure in this. But anyways, that's what I'm going to end the video on. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. Give me a like. Leave some comments down below if you want to. Let me know what you think the problem is. Maybe you're an automatic transmission wizard, and you can help me out with it. I don't know, that'd be sweet. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at muddybeards 4x4. Check out our website, muddybeards4x4.com. We've got shirts, stickers, all kinds of fun stuff you could buy. Really helps support the channel. Anyways, until next time, guys, we'll see you on the trail.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.